Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Welcome back, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
We have an episode today about inclusion, as you can tell from the title, that actually was inspired by one of our preschool peeps. Allison has the information about who inspired this. Go ahead.
So one of our preschool peeps, her name is Kathy Bitter. She is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and she wrote us asking about inclusion.
And that's a topic that I love to talk about, not only because of education I've received about it, but because I've worked with programs that are fully inclusive, in which children who are within the range of typical development, physically and brain development wise, are working side by side on the same sorts of things with children who may have either physical disabilities, learning challenges, developmental delays, and they are all in the same class, all working on the same topic, maybe in different ways slightly, but working on the same sort of topic to build knowledge. I think it's important to start with a definition of inclusion. And Allison and I, we did a little research about this. We found what we think is a really good definition of it. It comes from the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. So hello, Wisconsin, if you're from there. Here's a definition from one of your websites. It says early childhood inclusion embodies the values, policies, and practices that support the right of every infant and young child and his or her family, regardless of ability, to participate in a broad range of activities and contexts as full members of families, communities, and society. So in our programs, the children are full members of the class who get to participate in everything that is going on at whatever level they can, and in a way that will help to promote them to reach new heights from whatever level they are at. I think that that's a fair way to describe it, if we're going to talk definition.
I like that definition because I like this full member of the community aspect, because I think that kind of describes it in a way that everyone can understand what that means to be a full member of your society or your community or your classroom or your family is a nice way to describe it, because then you know what that means and what that entails to become a full member of any kind of group that you are in. So I think that it really allows everybody to understand what that means.
And when we think full member, it means for young children, especially,
yes,
that everybody gets a way to participate in what's happening. And I can give you all an example of what I'm talking about. You may have a class, let's say they are studying a topic like rocks. And you may have some children who are able and at a level where they can really deeply investigate the differences between different type of rocks, and they can do compare and contrast and graph with you and carry heavy rocks and break rocks open, and they're able to create those charts and graphs and provide you with dictation. You may have some of those children in your class. At the same time, you may have children who are at a different physical or developmental level, and so they're going to explore rocks as well, but they're going to do it a little differently. We're going to make some adjustments. For example, a child with low muscle tone still gets to explore the rocks, maybe needs some help carrying some of the larger rocks, can't do it so independently. A child who has developmental delays that impact communication, well, maybe they can't give you those quotes, but you can offer them different rocks and ask them questions and have them point to things and indicate what it is they want to explore. Some children may be at a developmental level in that class that's more sensory than investigative. So in that case, we're going to give them rocks that have different, they feel different, they smell different, and we're going to let them explore with their senses. So everyone in the class is exploring rocks, but in different ways, depending on the individual children's needs. And, you know, every child has needs in some way. They just look different. You know, when I think about children all in one class with all different levels of ability doing these things, I just think of these classes that I've observed where children are exploring during free playtime or in small groups, but the small groups are not all doing the exact same thing with the materials, but they all get to explore the material, and they're all offered the opportunity to explore in some way. I think where adults maybe struggle with this, which when I say it, I feel like it sounds pretty logical. Oh, we're going to make adjustments based on individual children. I think where adults get caught or hung up, it's this notion that everyone has to do the same experiment. Everyone has to be able to sit for the same amount of time. Everybody has to be able to manipulate the objects a certain way. Everybody should be at this level of thinking. And by the way, if you're not, you know, like you're just going to be bored or lost, or because this is how we're doing it. And that's what we need to step away from. We have to think about who are the children in the class? How can they all explore this? How can I make it possible for everyone to have an experience based on whatever it is you're doing?
Right. I think adults, get stuck in that because that's what school was like when we were kids. It was everybody got taught the same. You're all talked at the same way. This is the lesson. You either get it or you don't. If you don't get it, not my problem kind of thing. And you moved on. And I think when people who are not in education think of school, that's what they think school is like. It's the teacher standing in front of the class and they're talking to all the students and the lesson is exactly the same. There's no accommodations. This is it. And that's not what school is, you know, and that's not what my classroom looks like, especially in early childhood. It definitely does not look like that, where, you know, you're teaching like a teacher directed thing all day long. And I think that's why adults get stuck because they don't see it, you know, if they've never been in it. And I think some of the teachers are still kind of stuck in that, like that's what school looks like for some, you know. And when you're talking about early childhood, it's so inclusive of everybody, you know. And it's so, when you walk into an early childhood classroom, it's not the teacher directing everything, you know. So, and I think they get stuck in that, like, is there really any learning going on here? Everything looks different. And it's really like, no, that child is learning. This is what they should be doing right now for their developmental level, or their, you know, wherever they're at, is what you kind of meet them where they're at instead of going over their head, you know. And yes, learning is happening because I'm meeting them where they're at, you know. That's what, to me, teaching should be. You know. So
when I was
do
a
understand
student,
why people get stuck, though.
they do get stuck. And when I was a student,
Yeah.
I'm going to date myself, but when I was a student, if in any way you could not do things the same way most of the children did, you were not included in that setting.
Yes.
Children were put in separate classes where they were not given the opportunity to explore things the same way or learn things the same way as the other children. So whether that was because of a physical disability or a developmental delay or whatever it was, because you were not in that space with everybody else, which is the opposite of inclusion. We now know that all children benefit from inclusion. The children who have accommodations and educational plans, they benefit from the modeling and the interactions, and even just the opportunity to rise to the occasion. If we never challenge children, how do we know what they can rise to? When we do inclusion well, there are certain things that it promotes. So the results that we want to get from inclusive experiences for children and I'm talking about all children, children with and without disabilities, all children need to have a sense of belonging and membership in their peer group. They would develop positive social relationships, and their learning would be at their individual full potential. My potential looks different than your potential, and that is always true.
That's true.
My
Yeah.
potential to do math is not going to be the same as Allison's potential to do math.
Right.
It is always true. And
Yeah.
we have to recognize that when we give children opportunities to reach their full potential, it isn't going to look the same for every child. I wouldn't expect it to.
It's true.
But maybe I have taken wherever this child is and stretched them a little. And if I've stretched them a little and they've gained something from it, then it's a wonderful thing. But children who were separated from their peer groups and put into spaces and places where they were not challenged in that way were never stretched. What a sad shame that is.
That is really sad.
Right?
I think this is why like adults that are like our age are like, oh, these disabilities didn't exist when we were kids. And no, they did.
They did.
They did. You just didn't see it because they were in a separate classroom, or in some instances, if you have a very large district, an entirely separate school.
Yeah.
You know, like where I grew up, there was 5 elementary schools, and only one of those elementary schools took special needs children. So in my elementary school, I didn't see anyone, you know, that, so like that was, and now it's not like that at all. All the schools around here, at least, are very inclusive, and like there is no just like you go over there, or that, you know, I mean, I think there's some in the school I'm in now, there's like one classroom where they really need a little bit more, I think, maybe.
Yeah, there usually is.
Inclusive. Yeah, so like that happens, but like for the most part, like there's children in my class that also have speech, and there's one that does not speak at all, you know, and she's right with us just like everybody else. And when it's time for dictation, I actually, like, she sees me writing on post-it notes, you know, like when they're trying to describe their art, and she does not speak. So I give her the post-it note, and I was like, and I have her kind of write a little, whatever she wants to write. Now she's 3, so it's scribble writing. And then I put her name on it, and she hangs it up, and she's so proud of that little post-it note that she made, because it's her own dictation, even though we don't know exactly what it says or what she was trying to get across necessarily, but it's one step further, I think, than just not hanging anything up at all, you know. So
the grant money that goes for special education today from the federal government says, the policies for this grant money say that children should be in the least restrictive environment, not the most restrictive environment, the least restrictive environment. And very often the least restrictive environment is that inclusive classroom where they get all of these opportunities. There are, and that brings me to, there are 3 different features that are taken into consideration and would help to describe what an inclusive environment is. And those aspects of inclusivity are access, participation, and supports. So when we think about access, it includes things like removing physical barriers that might be a challenge for some children, and offering multiple ways to promote learning and development. So this can take many forms, this access. It can be, does your area where you live have access to high quality programs so that the children can be enrolled in them? It can be, does your class, do the classrooms, are they set up so that children of all different physical abilities can have access to all of the materials that are available to everyone in the room, right? If a child required a wheelchair, would that child still have access to everything in the room? And if not, how do we arrange the room? How do we make adaptations to our arrangement to ensure that all children can go and get what they want to use and what they want to play with and all that? So how that can be that sort of access. So it can be access to programs. It can be access physically to the things in a classroom. It can also be access to an environment that promotes learning at different levels, which would be universal design, which we talked about in a prior episode. So you can look that up. Is the curriculum set up to support children at all different developmental levels? And that would be universal design, right? Everyone has an opportunity to participate. So in many different ways, children need access. And then there's the benchmark of participation. And this is when we promote engagement in play and a sense of belonging intentionally. So the adults are promoting, intentionally supporting and promoting belonging, participation, and engagement of all children using different tiered models of intensity of how we're going to approach the material. And this is about individualizing your teaching, which again, we've talked about in other episodes.
Yeah.
I know that all children have their own path to learning, and one path may look very different from another. It's up to the adults to figure out how can all children participate in some way in what we're doing. I was watching one time, I was watching a class, children do a cooking experience. And there were children participating in this cooking experience who were able to take the measuring cups and the spoons and measure out ingredients. There were other children who were not there yet, who were not yet able to do that. And by the way, every child has a right to feel some success. So when the teacher was figuring out how are we going to work together in small groups to put this cooking experience together in a way where all children could participate, she intentionally planned measuring things in different ways, helping. There was one child there who had some sort of muscular challenge, and I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I could tell because the teacher went over to this child and hand over hand poured with them because the child was struggling with that sort of movement. So it's not that the child didn't get to pour the ingredients like everybody else.
Right.
The child required hand over hand assistance. But by giving that hand over hand assistance, the teacher was ensuring that everyone got to participate in pouring things in. Some children were measuring without assistance. Other children needed the assistance. But in some way, it had been intentionally designed that everyone could participate in every aspect of that experience.
Yeah.
And then there's the supports. Supports are needed for everyone, the children, the families, and the professionals. We are really ensuring we have an inclusive environment when we ensure that the early childhood professionals have the professional development and the support that they need to work with children, regardless of the child's abilities. We can work with everyone and we have the support should we need it, and we have the education. They tap into people like clinicians and consultants to figure out how to make these things happen. These are districts who are put money aside to pay professionals to help them when they need it. Or not only districts, but also private programs, quality rating system programs where they know that they can access experts or technical assistance with implementing curriculum at many different levels for many different abilities. And again, they're provided with the education and professional development that they need. Families are also provided with support. We make sure that they have the supports that they need from the community, the resources, the referrals, the advice, wherever they need to seek that support. And then the children get support from all of us because of that, because the teachers and the professionals, whoever you are able to access support. You bring that support to the children. Because families are able to access support, they're able to bring that to the children. If the adults are not being supported, we're
Then it
unable
trickles
to
down.
we're unable
trickles
to help
down.
the children as much.
Yeah.
So I think support really needs to focus on the adults.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it does trickle down. Like if I as a teacher aren't getting the supports I need to help that student, then it does trickle down to that student, where then they don't get the support that they need in order to learn. But that's because I'm not getting the support I need in order to teach him, so it does it's definitely a trickle down effect. I think the support is probably maybe could always be more, like it takes a lot of support. It takes a lot of collaboration. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot, so the support is definitely needed there for this to all go the way it should go and have
And
full inclusion.
Yeah. And the teachers, when you're seeking your hours for professional development,
Yes.
please look for
Yes.
things that help you to create an inclusive environment and
Yes.
fulfill your hours that way. There are some other goals related to having an inclusive environment, and they are having high expectations for each child to reach their individual full potential. There's a wonderful quote, and I think I've shared it on the podcast in the past. No one rises to low expectations. One of my favorite quotes, and Alison and I have been working on collecting quotes. No one rises to low expectations. We have to have high yet realistic expectations for what the children can accomplish in the time that they're with us. But if I have no expectations, if I think, oh, this child just can't do this, they're never going to have the opportunity to surprise us and rise to it. Or maybe not surprise us and just be given the opportunity to participate in a way that they deserve to participate. The program that you work for, and I know you all don't have control over this necessarily, but you need a philosophy about inclusion that we here in our program include children in an inclusive environment that promotes each child reaching his or her full potential in their own way. You need to have this as part of the goals, the philosophy, the mission statement, whatever you want to call it, of your program, so that people will start to focus on, okay, if I work here, then one of my goals as someone who works here is to include all children.
Yes. Right.
So it needs to become an overall part of the program or the system that you work with. And I'm going to just venture a guess that when you are trying to come up with these philosophies, if you don't already have one, you're going to need support for that. And just think about what high quality curriculums say about including all children, and that will help to guide you. I know that the best curriculums include all children and the best learning approaches include all children.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I use the phrase all children, I'm reminded of Teaching Strategies, who puts out the creative curriculum and the assessment tool of gold. They always mean 3 types of children when they talk about including all children. They mean children with special needs and disabilities. They mean children who are ahead of the expectations for their age, because children who are ahead and or gifted, if we want to use that word, those children also have special needs and need us to teach in a way that they can continue to excel.
100%,
and children with language differences, children who may need more support as they're learning whatever language is primary in your program. So they're always talking about, how do we include these 3 types of children? Approaches to learning like project-based learning, which we've talked about on the podcast. Other approaches that you may have heard about, like Montessori, Reggio Emilia, high scope, creative curriculum. All of these approaches are inclusive of all children. It's when the curriculum says things like, everybody do this worksheet, and here's the only way it can be done, that we're not being inclusive. And that's why the National Association for the Education of Young Children has basically said no to the worksheets.
Yeah, because there is only one right or wrong answer on a worksheet. And
they exclude children.
Yeah.
It's excluding children.
Yes.
Well, I hope that this addressed the original question. If not, please let us know.
Please let us know.
And I hope it gave you all some things to think about what inclusion looks like, and the importance of varying and adjusting what you do to meet the needs of all children, so that everybody has a chance to succeed, each in their own way.
Yeah.
Okay, preschool peeps, we hope you'll send us your ideas too, and we will put it on the
Yes.
list of topics for this podcast. In the
Yes.
meantime,
And if you want us to use your name, please just let us know, and we will, just like Kathy did.
yes.
And thank you, Kathy, for sharing this excellent topic with us. That was so thoughtful.
Definitely. And we will catch you next time on the podcast.
Bye, peeps.